returned from China, a new man. This Tenzo that he is criticizing, probably he is not like Dogen before he went to China, but I think maybe they have some things in common. Because before Dogen went to China, he was staying in the same monastery, Keninji, and he was clearly not happy with the practice there, so he went to China. But still, he had some views of practice that might be similar with this Tenzo that he is criticizing here. For example, when Dogen spoke to the Tenzos, the famous conversations he had with the Tenzos in China, he saw practice as maybe only zazen and reading sutras or studying the text of the ancestors. And so when he saw an old guy who was Tenzo working really hard under the sun, drying the mushrooms, which his son talked about that in his Rinko. So he didn't understand why he was doing that, why he was wasting his time being Tenzo if he could be doing zazen or just reading the ancient texts. So, but then this Tenzo said something to Dogen that really maybe changed his life, and I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that he brought back from China to Japan. That practice is not just that, but practice is everything we do 24 hours. It's every activity we do, our work, including the Tenzo work. And so this guy that Dogen met when he went back to Japan was clearly kind of like a shock for him. Maybe he saw part of himself the way he was before going to China. But maybe it's even like the case of this Tenzo, maybe it's even worse, because there is this book, the Dogen, the mystical realist, in the library, and there the guy gives like a big historical background of Dogen and Japan of his time. So Buddhism in Japan in that time, maybe still today, but in that time, like very often people became monks, or they went to have positions in monasteries, not because actually they had a way-seeking mind, but because it was a way to get money, to have like a social status, and to so anyway, Dogen came back from China and saw in this Tenzo everything he thought it was wrong. Like this guy, maybe he was not even seeking to study the way, although he was reading some sutras, but maybe he was there just like chatting, as he said, and hanging out, and maybe just relaxing while somebody else was doing his Tenzo job. And also another thing that Dogen learned with one Tenzo in China was that like other people are not me. I think that was also another teaching that he got from meeting these Tenzos in China. So, and clearly this was not what was in mind of this Tenzo he was criticizing, because he was just giving all his responsibilities to other people. So yeah, that's the first thing I noticed. Like for Dogen must have been a shock, even though he knew how Buddhism was in Japan. After going to China and having all those experiences, the first place he stayed back was in the same monastery as where he was before. It was before he started his first monastery in Kyoto. So yeah, that's the first point. But another point that comes from this situation, it came to me that, but many people might ask, why was Dogen so critical? Like not only here, he was very often criticizing like other monks or institutions and many things. Isn't Buddhism about accepting reality as it is? So yeah, of course you can see in Dogen that he was somehow restless. He was not satisfied easily with things. He had maybe high ideals or high standards, and maybe that's why he left Japan to look for something that maybe would be more true to him. And maybe truth was also one standard for him. Like in the example, I think Taiga-san also talked about this, but he also, in this part of the text, it's also mentioned the donation of sand. So Dogen said that it was more important, maybe more valuable, a donation, even if it's very small, made with the heart, with a lot of sincerity, like this small boy who donated sand to Shakyamuni while he was making sand cakes. He said that this donation was more valuable than a large donation that was not done with like a true intention or a true heart. And this boy in the Buddhist mythology became the King Ashoka in a different life. So I think this small example shows a little bit of what were the values of Dogen. So maybe he was not seeing in the practice around him in Japan, maybe truth. He was seeing people practicing for the wrong reasons or not really with sincerity. And I think he was, and somehow also, although he was a very practical man and very down to earth, he was an idealist a little bit. There's another passage, it's not like in the one that I read now, but it's also in Tenzokyokun. He tells us to really devote ourselves and to surpass the ancients, to be even better than the ancients, to strive really hard. And then in the end he says, we must aspire to the highest of ideals without becoming arrogant in our manner. So yeah, so here he's saying you should really aim high, you should really give your best, give your all that you can. Maybe a little bit like the example that Docho-san gave of Antaiji as being like a high standard restaurant in comparison to a hot dog stand. So I think here Dogen is saying the same. And there's also another thing that it's related to this kind of critical spirit of Dogen, that the translator of this book here, Daniel Layton, he wrote in the introduction. So in this part of the introduction, he's talking about the last text, not Tenzokyokun. He's talking about the pure standards for the temple administrators. And in the first part of this text, Dogen, he relates some koans. And talking about these koans, Daniel Layton says, what becomes apparent in reading these examples is that its heroes are often very far from what would be considered exemplary by any conventional standard. Dogen most highly praises some of his exemplars specifically for incidents in which they apparently violate precepts and regulations, or even are temporarily expelled from the community. And then he gives some examples and then he continues. For Dogen, the purpose of the Zen community is not based on usual social criteria or cultural psychological criteria, but solely on the unswerving devotion to universal awakening. So yeah, here he's saying that Dogen is not always based on what people would call maybe normal morality, but his way of thinking, his way of expressing himself maybe had different parameters. That was the most important for him was to spread this teaching of Buddha Dharma, and that sometimes goes against common sense maybe, or what people would think it's the most moral in different societies. Okay, and also one thing that I've noticed I'm gonna talk soon about the commentary of Fujiyama on Tenzokyokun, and I think this characteristic of being sometimes not always in accord with normal morality is also a big characteristic of many other Zen teachers, and including Sawaki Roshi and Uchiyama Roshi. So one example is the book The Teachings of Homeless Kodo. Probably all of you know, but the first version of this book was actually Uchiyama Roshi. He collected some sayings, maybe he just wrote them down from his teacher Kodo Sawaki. Then after Sawaki Roshi died, Uchiyama Roshi he wrote newspaper articles commenting on Sawaki, and then after that became a book. But the first version of the book was in the 60s, and in the 60s there was a guy, Shohaku Okumura, who is a Dharma heir of Uchiyama. At that time he was just a university student, and so he later, a few years ago, there's an English version of the Teachings of Homeless Kodo, which also has comments of Shohaku Okumura. And in this version, he approaches the same issue. He relates, he comments actually in one text where Uchiyama is saying that in 1,400 years of Buddhism in Japan, the monks have failed to teach Japanese people the essence of Buddhism as a religion. And he said that in most of history of Buddhism, like, people have paying too much attention to what Uchiyama Roshi called ridiculous superstitions, instead of like missing the main point of Buddhism, according to him, is how to live a true life. So about this commentary of Uchiyama, Shohaku Okumura also makes a comment in the Teachings of Homeless Kodo. Is it fair to call all these activities superstitions? Some priests in traditional Buddhist institutions, as well as some scholars of religion and cultural anthropology, wouldn't agree with Uchiyama Roshi. But Sawaki Roshi and Uchiyama Roshi are speaking from the homeless practitioner's perspective, which has nothing to do with religious institutions or ordinary religious culture. For them, Shukyo simply means to study, practice, and live the fundamental truth. Shukyo before was translated as religion, but now here he's using the Japanese term. Even when they are respected, such people, Sawaki and Uchiyama, have often been considered outsiders within religious institutions. For example, Reverend Heirin Yamada, a former president of Komazawa University, who later became abbot of Eiheiji Monastery, said, Sawaki Roshi was a respectable Zen master, but because he spoke ill of Buddhist priests, I didn't like him. So this is another example, I think, probably of the same spirit of Dogen, who was displeased with what he saw of how Buddhism was in his time, and he was very critical, and for sure he also displeased many people. And Sawaki and Uchiyama Roshi, apparently they had like a similar attitude, and here Shohaku Okumura says that that's because they have this homeless perspective, and I think here he means homeless, not only about the meaning of a monk is a person who left home and became kind of homeless, but maybe because homeless in the way of trying to see the teaching of Buddhism in everything, not only through blindly following the institutions, not like only dogmatically, but also always analyzing, always trying to be alert, and always trying to follow those ideals that were quoted about Dogen just a little bit ago, short while ago. And I think Docho-san also has been following this tradition, giving one example in the adult practice articles. Docho-san wrote in 2005 about the time when he was when he became abbot. I think it was 2002 or 2003. So he had to go to Eheiji to do a 3-day course, I think, to finish like some bureaucratic stuff, so he could actually become abbot. And when he was there, he had to answer a questionnaire about things related to Buddhism, and the things he read there, maybe they were more related to what Fujiyama was criticizing here as some superstitions. It had nothing to do, in his point of view, with what Shakyamuni or Dogen Zenji had thought. So I know that maybe Docho-san, maybe his views changed. It was like, when he wrote this was like 15 years ago, and maybe he sees something in a different way now. But anyway, I'm just gonna read it, what he wrote, so we can also have the idea of, I think it's a similar spirit from what we've been saying until now. So after the questionnaire in the Eheiji paper that they gave him, there was a space to fill in with your own opinion or if you have any comments. And then Docho-san, when he was becoming abbot of Antaiji, he